region troubled by war, terrorism, weak and failed states, and civil unrest. But how did it get this way? The map of today's Middle East was mostly drawn after the First World War, the war that planted many of the seeds of conflict that still plague Israel, Palestine, Iraq, Syria, and even Iran today.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Middle East in 20 minutes-ish. It's myself, Alpha, with my co-host, Ghost. It is December 7th, 2025. We're in the last month of the last month of the year. Holy smokes, this year flew by. Damn. But I am very interested in hearing what you got to say today, Ghost. What are we going to be talking about?
Man, we have all kinds of things to be talking about. And the two biggest ones, I think, are probably this Doha forum that just happened. I guess technically it's still happening today. Although I guess they're several hours ahead of us, so it's probably nighttime there by now. And this Trump national security strategy document that was released, that the White House published. Those two things together, I think, really have fundamentally just, really this national security strategy document has fundamentally changed everything geopolitically.
Nice. And I'm glad we're going to talk about this because I wasn't really up to speed on all this, given it's a lot of people are talking about it. There's some people that are trying to blow it out of proportion, the same players, the same faces when it comes to that. So I'm definitely interested in learning about that, brother. Fire off.
Yeah. So let's start with Doha, because I think Doha is a little easier. It's a little more succinct and easier to talk about. Let me share my screen. So one of the bigger stories right now out of Doha is just what the Qatari PM was saying. And so this was like a 2-day conference where you had all sorts of people, primarily from the Middle East, but like Tucker Carlson was there. So, Laura Loomer's losing her mind right now about Tucker Carlson being there. Ted Cruz as well, like losing his mind about Tucker Carlson being there. Tom Barrack, who's the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, but also the special envoy to Syria, and Donald Trump's closest friend, oldest friend, the person he probably trusts the most outside of his own family, was there. We're going to look at a clip from him. But this guy, Tamim, Qatar's emir, who Trump said in September of 2017 at a meeting at the White House on camera, he said, none of these people are going to believe me when I say this, but you and I have been friends for actually a really long time, and I'm going to help you navigate this situation you're in with the Saudis. The Saudis had declared war, along with all the other Arab states, declared war on Qatar in the summer of 2017 after MBS becomes crown prince. And they end up signing a peace deal like the week that Trump leaves office in 2021, and pretty much have just been like good allies ever since. And historically, they were not allies. And the Muslim Brotherhood was a big part of that. And I know that that's a subject that you go pretty hard on, that you and I were talking about. That was a big part of that, was the Muslim Brotherhood, their presence in Qatar. And my read on Qatar is that I think, without getting too deep into that rabbit hole, is just that there's a good twin, evil twin element in every place in the world. Chris Paul coined that phrasing. And I think what happened with Trump when he first entered office was he partnered up with the good twin in Qatar. They actually signed at the sort. This wasn't highly publicized at all, but I don't think it was even announced until like a month later. But at the sword dance in May of 2017, Trump met with this guy, Tamim, and they signed a counterterrorism agreement. And it was the first country to sign a counterterrorism agreement with Trump. And I think that agreement, as I understand it, lays the foundation for destroying ISIS, which Putin and Trump then do together in 2019. And I think that also lays the foundation for going after all these groups across the Middle East and basically just unwinding and detangling the Middle East. And Qatar, of course, has been a hub for these nefarious organizations, including MI6, CIA, Mossad, Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, you name it, they're in Qatar. But also, especially ever since Biden was in office, Qatar has kind of become like the peacemaking facilitator of the world. And they're the ones, of course, who are who Trump has pointed to as the key player in facilitating peace, primarily in the Middle East. They're the ones who organized the Abraham Accords on paper. So, you know, I think that Qatar is a really, really important place, as Trump has pointed out, and he's made it very clear. And so the headline here is Qatari PM. This is not Tamim. This would be because the prime minister, his brother, I believe, says that he won't write a check to rebuild what Israel destroyed in Gaza. Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Abdulrahman Al Thani suggested Sunday that his country will not foot the bill for rebuilding Gaza, despite speculation that it would mean that it would be the main backer of reconstruction. Quote, "We are not the ones who are going to write the check to rebuild what others destroyed," Al Thani said during an onstage interview at the Doha Forum, an annual diplomatic conference. Quote, "When you are talking about Gaza, Israel flattened this land." He indicated that Qatar will limit its funding to humanitarian aid, declaring that it will continue supporting the Palestinian people and do what it can to alleviate their suffering. Quote, "Our payments will only go to help the Palestinian people if we see that the help coming to them is insufficient," Al Thani said, while without elaborating. He also listed a succession of Israeli prime ministers and security agencies that he said endorsed Qatar's sending funds into Gaza in the years before the Hamas invasion on October 7, 2023. And here's the quote: "Netanyahu, Bennett, we have dealt with all the agencies. Lapid was the prime minister at a certain point of time. Mossad, Shin Bet, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Defense Ministry, all of them were involved." And what he's referring to there is he's referring to in 2018 when the Palestinian Authority cut off funding to Hamas, to Gaza, because Hamas tried to assassinate the Palestinian prime minister when he was visiting Gaza. And they said, "All right, we're done with you. Like, you're terrorists. No more money for you. You can starve to death." And then Netanyahu internally told his people, "We have an opportunity here to drive a wedge between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and get them to go to war with one another, but also to get Hamas to take over the West Bank, because if Hamas, a militant terrorist group, takes over the West Bank will go to war with Israel. And that means we can then invade Gaza and the West Bank. And, you know, if you fast forward, imagine them doing to the West Bank what they're doing to, or what they've already done to Gaza. That's, I think, what the plan." And so his justification to the Qataris was, if we don't inject money into Gaza, there's going to be a humanitarian crisis. And so they agreed to give Israel, because no money flows. Nobody's allowed to even visit Palestine. You cannot get a direct flight to Palestine. You have to get permission from Israel to go to Palestine. It is a internment camp. It is a concentration camp, both the West Bank and Gaza. You have to get permission from Israel to go there, as I understand it. And because of that, Israel actually blocked a meeting months ago of all of the prime ministers who wanted to meet, foreign ministers wanted to meet in the West Bank to figure out how to take out Hamas. And Netanyahu blocked it and said, "No, none of y'all are allowed to come. We won't let you in." So this dynamic is playing out now. And I think this is a lot of posturing from Qatar. I think Qatar is posturing because the way that Trump has laid it out, the way that Steve Witkoff has laid it out, the way that Tom Barrack has laid it out, this is going to be a real estate deal. This, like, the rebuilding of Gaza is going to be a real estate deal. I've been involved in many real estate deals and construction projects in my professional career, and it's all driven by making money. There's opportunities to make money. So this is not a charity case. This is not like giving money to Gaza like on welfare. This is an investment opportunity to build something that is going to generate a return, that is going to generate revenue. The Qataris understand that. I think the point they're probably making here is that they're not going to just throw money into a place that is going to continue to be bombed by Israel. And to put a bookend on that, and to supplement that, we have this from, if I can pull up the right. Here it is. So here's another headline. This is the same guy, same speech. And
let me interrupt you for just a second, because I was checking something to make sure, but it's not us. It's all of Rumble right now. So for the audience that's watching over there on Rumble, live chats are down, viewer things are down. So if there's any questions that you want us to see for ghosts, and you're watching on Rumble, you're gonna have to put that in the actual comment section, not the live chat, but the comment section, and I'll be able to track that for any questions you might have for ghosts. Everybody else on all the platforms is good, but it looks like Rumble's having an issue right now. Didn't mean to interrupt you, brother, but
all good, all good. Yeah, so here's another headline from the same speech. Qatari Prime Minister, Gaza truce can't be considered ceasefire. I'm sorry, Gaza truce can't be considered a ceasefire until Israel leaves the Strip. And so basically he's demanding that the IDF needs to pull out and fulfill their obligation to leave the Strip. His quote is, "We are at a critical moment. Quote, what we have just done is a pause. We cannot consider it yet a ceasefire. A ceasefire cannot be completed unless there is a full withdrawal of the Israeli forces. There is stability back in Gaza, and people can go in and out, which is not the case today." It says at the start of the truce on October 10, Israel withdrew its forces to a newly drawn yellow line that roughly divides the Gaza Strip into eastern and western halves. While Israel was supposed to allow for the reopening of the Rafah border crossing, it held off on doing so for well over a month, arguing that Hamas must release the remaining deceased hostages in Gaza. The body of a slain police officer, Ron Gavili, is still held in the Strip. So I think it sounds like they have all of them except for maybe one body. And then going back to, let's see. This is the quote, the first phase of the hostage deal is still not complete. While Ronnie hasn't returned home, we demand that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump pressure Hamas and the Islamic Jihad to return Ronnie home immediately. We can't move to the second phase of the deal without Ronnie here, Gavili's family said in a statement Saturday evening. So then we couple this with a few other things. So Trump has come out and said that the second phase of the deal, which is the implementation of the ISF, that this is deploying the International Stabilization Force, which is supposed to be made up of purportedly Turkish, Jordanian, Egyptian, maybe Indonesian, and I guess Egyptian, Jordanian, Turkish, and potentially Indonesian soldiers are going to be deployed in Gaza, and then once they have their bearings, the IDF pulls out. Trump says that's going to happen by Christmas. That's what he said the other day. I don't know if we're sticking to that, but that's what he said. Here's the senior Saudi diplomat. It's Israel, not the Palestinian Authority, that most needs reform to secure peace. Manal Radwan says the Palestinian Authority is already working on reforms, but the Israeli government opposes two-state solution and cites against Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims. Quote, the Palestinians have been reforming for the past 30 years. President Mahmoud Abbas had put forward a robust reform plan that he committed himself to because this is good for the Palestinians. Quote, Saudi Arabia, of course, is committed, and we work on a daily basis with the Palestinian Authority to help in its reform plan. But what we need is to really get a sustainable peace and security is an end to this conflict, and to implement President Trump's 20-point peace plan and to implement the Security Council resolution is a reformed Israeli government. Quote, we have an Israeli government that opposes the two-state solution. We have an Israeli government that has officials continuously inciting against Palestinians, against Arabs, against Muslims. We don't see that we have a partner for peace, not even a partner for a sustainable ceasefire. So that is the actual and the important reform that we are hoping to see. Now, last week, we talked about how MBS, there was that story out that MBS was not backing down, that Trump got angry with him in their meeting. This is the Saudi crown prince, that Trump wants him to normalize with Israel. And he said, I'm not doing that without a Palestinian state. I made that promise. I'm not backing down from that. Those are my terms. And Trump's like, well, Trump knows that's not going to happen. I think that was all just narrative being fed to Barack Ravid to be reported in Axios, because Trump is seeding the narrative that the problem here ultimately is Israel's failure to recognize a Palestinian state. And to that point, this is from today, Netanyahu rules out creation of a Palestinian state. So Israel will not allow the creation of a Palestinian state since its true purpose is the destruction of the one and only Jewish state, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said. Netanyahu made the remarks on Sunday in Jerusalem during a joint press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. While Merz reaffirmed Berlin's commitment to the creation of an independent Palestinian state, Netanyahu openly disagreed with him, but claiming that such an entity would be committed to our destruction at our doorstep. Quote, they already had a state in Gaza, a de facto state, and it was used to try to destroy the one and only Jewish state, Netanyahu stated, referring to the Palestinian enclave that has been effectively ruled by the militant group Hamas. Israel believes that there's a path to advance a broader peace with the Arab states and to establish a workable peace with our Palestinian neighbors that does not involve the creation of an independent entity, he added. So, again, I already explained before how Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are two different entities. In 2006, when the Hamas won this election, whether elections are real or not, won the election, the first thing they did is they took out their guns and they went to war with the Palestinian Authority security forces. And they fought them and they drove them out of Gaza. And then once they were defeated, then they turned their weapons on the IDF, who had occupied Gaza since 1967. They've been there for 40 years at that point. And they turned their weapons on the IDF and they attacked them. They drove them out of Gaza. But the first entity they attacked was the Palestinian Authority. And then that was why in 2018, Netanyahu said, let's give more money to the Hamas, build them up, and then they will go fight the Palestinian Authority and take over the West Bank. And then the militancy of the West Bank will justify the annexation of all Palestine into Israel. That was the plan. So it's very obvious to most people who've been paying attention. This is what's happening. This is their goal. A year ago, people were denying this. A year ago, people were like, Israel, or maybe it was 2 years ago, Israel is the peace-seeking country. Israel is the one who wants to see this all resolved and come to a head. It's just not true. They're saying openly now, we can't even live side by side with these people. We have to annex Palestine. It has to become part of Israel.
I was about to say, there's if the simplest thing to take from this information is Netanyahu doesn't want peace.
Yeah.
Like, period. He doesn't. And do you think, like, a lot of the moves Trump has made, or a lot of these different moves in the Middle East, kind of forced them into this position where they had to just show their card? We're not going to do it.
Yeah. I think, and the proof there, Alpha, because people will hair on fire scream at us for saying this, saying, you know, this is hopium, this is copium, this is you're making excuses for Trump. The proof of what you just said is playing out right now in Europe. Right now in Europe, the narrative now, if you've been on X in the past 24 hours, all the European shills and the European influencers are all saying that America is now their number one enemy. They have to go to war with America now because America is effectively saying we've given up on Ukraine. We're siding with Russia. That's what this national security strategy is saying, and it does basically say that. It's a hard deviation from every national security strategy that's been put out since Clinton. Every single one. It's a very hard deviation from all that. It doesn't talk about the CCP. It doesn't talk about radical Islamic terrorism. It doesn't talk about any of that stuff. It doesn't even mention Israel. It only mentions Israel one time, and that's in passing, referring to the different players who are helping to rebuild Syria. That's the only time it even mentions Israel. And because of that, Mark Levin and Laura Loomer are flipping out and think that Trump's a traitor. And in some ways they're right. Some ways they're right. He is a traitor to the Zionist cause. But what Trump has done in Europe is I'll just show you this one headline. This is from RT. This is an op-ed. This is from Larry Johnson. Trump files for divorce from NATO over Ukraine. The new U.S. national security strategy signals a massive foreign policy shift. It remains to be seen if Washington is serious about it. But that's what this is. Trump is filing for divorce from NATO. He's basically saying, we're done. We're pulling out of NATO. We're pulling out of Europe. We will sell you as many weapons as you want, and you can go kill yourself. You can go die fighting Russia if that's what you want. But that's your thing. We're not doing that. And then here's Viktor Orban. He says the EU is planning to start a war with Russia by 2030. And that is all the rhetoric out of Europe right now indicates that. They're talking about establishing a continental army. They're talking about, going, all kinds of things that they want to do that is going to be subversive to the peace process. And Russia's been accusing them of this for years. And now they're just kind of, just like in Israel, the mask is coming off and they're just openly saying it. And they're saying it's a good thing. It's a good thing to want to go to war with Russia. And really the net effect of everything, whether you're talking about Venezuela or you're talking about Africa or you're talking about the Middle East or you're talking about China or you're talking about Europe and Russia, the point we've reached, Alpha, is it's becoming very easy for people like you and I who've been studying this for a long time to identify who is getting paid to say things and who is paying them. The most likely entity that's paying them based on what their rhetoric is, based on what these influencer accounts are putting out, and the narrative spin they're putting out on this stuff, because the pro-war influencer accounts are the ones that are being funded by the bad elements, right? Like those are the shills, the people who are trying to subvert peace. And I would put Laura Loomer at the very top of that list. She is absolutely trying to subvert every single thing Trump does. And I'll show you a clip here, a post here to prove that here next. Every single thing that Trump is put out, she comes in behind him and tries to undermine him every single time. She's one of the most anti-Trump influencers on X.
Here's one of the tools that I'll share with you that's being used, and people are gonna be like, "Well, no, but don't say it," because then they'll stop doing it. They can't afford to stop doing it, because if they stop doing it, it's going to expose them. And this information comes off of, I was actually talking about, this is something that I've been doing, and then I got confirmation that much higher echelons are doing this. And one of the things that I've been doing on X specifically, Ghost, is these accounts that come in, and I'll put out content that I know it's going to draw them in. It's bait, what we call bait, right? Not clickbait, like in the terms of what you know it, but bait that's going to pull in people that you know are part of these operations. And when they come in, boom, you see all the bot accounts that come in with it. Well, then you go and you document all these bot accounts. And then later that day or the next day, you do one, where you target a different person that you know is part of that operation. And then all of a sudden bot accounts come in. Well, what you start doing, and then I'm doing a summary of a very, tedious process, is as you start doing this, you start to compare the bot farms. And what you'll find is certain topics, certain groups of influencers will all have a unique set of these same bots, which means that they're using these same, third-party companies or even ones of their own. And this is how you get to start establishing who's in certain rings of these operations. Now, again, I'm doing that at a much smaller level of what's going on the bigger picture. And what they're being able to find out through these things is these bot farms. Now, why is that important? Because they can take it a step further than what I can do. If they can show probable cause that this is part of a formal operation to subvert America, well, now you can write a search warrant to that third-party bot farm and find out who financed it.
Interesting.
And so there's a lot of things that are being put out by government officials, I'll say that is specifically meant to generate these massive things. And I'll tell you guys right now that Candace Owens is one of them. And it's allowing people to figure out how these things are going. And now this part's speculation. My speculation is one of the reasons that they're doing that is because either A, they're going to take them down in a way of exposure, because you can't stop somebody from doing it. You know what I mean? It may be a TOS thing, but it's not against the law to do that. Now, if you're part of a conspiracy, that's different. But what I think is there's going to be an exposure of that, or some type of thing where people aren't allowed to do that. And if you've seen these accounts that have been getting, $500,000, $1 million over and over and over and over, and you're just like, yeah, but the engagement doesn't reflect that as much, however you want to look at it. And all of a sudden that's removed and these people plummet. Well, the next thing you're going to hear, and you're going to hear this in unison from the same voices. And I think this already happened once, Ghost, where you're going to have all these people come out and say, oh, I'm being shadow banned. Oh, the algorithms got us. And what I think it is I think, no, those bot accounts got targeted, and that affected everybody's, their numbers. What exposed a lot of people, because there were a lot of people that said, yeah, I saw a minimal difference, but it's still kind of status quo for me. And that's kind of paints the picture for the audience. But anyways, a different topic, different thing. But going into this conversation, it's something I wanted to share.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting, and I think you're spot on. So this guy is someone who I've been very interested in for a long time, and I've been tracking him. He's not a very prominent name, so to speak, but he is an important figure in Saudi. The ex-Saudi intel chief says troublemaker Israel is greater threat to regional stability than Iran. This is from yesterday, and now this is Saudi Prince Turki Al Faisal. Al Faisal is the son of King Faisal. King Faisal he was the third king of Saudi Arabia. Him and his brothers famously, in 1961, Faisal went and met, this is when he was crown prince, went and met with JFK secretly. We learned about it later through a declassified document, but he secretly met with JFK. JFK gave him a bunch of advice and said, look, you will never be great. The Saudi royal family will never be great unless the Saudi people are great. You need to take all that money that y'all are making off of oil and invest it in your people. Even like to the extent of advocating for universal health care, things that 10 years ago we would have all said that's a communist idea. JFK is the most famous president for fighting communism. And here he is pitching socialism or forms of socialism, welfare state to the Saudis because it made the most sense for and this is going to tie into the next thing we're going to talk about. It made the most sense for their model of governance, given their circumstances. One of the poorest countries in the world 100 years ago, then oil is discovered. And then the House of Saud becomes one of the richest families in the world. But yet their people in the 1960s were, there no electricity, barely any plumbing. They were living beyond third world standards. And yet you had Aramco there and lots of oil wealth, including American oil wealth. There are lots of Americans, thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans living in Saudi Arabia. Santa Claus, there are pictures of Santa Claus on camels riding down the streets in Riyadh from the 1960s and the 1970s before the radicalization of the Middle East occurred in the 80s. But Faisal meets with JFK. JFK tells him to do all this stuff. He advises that he abolishes slavery. He's then killed in 63. 64, Faisal and his brothers go to the king, who's their the oldest brother, who's the second king of Saudi. He takes over when the founder of Saudi Arabia, MBS's grandfather, dies. And they go to him and they say, look, you've been in office for 11 years. You're a terrible king. You don't know what you're doing. You're incompetent. We love you, but you need to step down and let Faisal take over. And he does. He steps down, lives the rest of his life, and Faisal takes over. Had this been in Europe, they would have just killed him because that's how European monarchies work. But in the Middle East, in the East, it's all done through consensus. It's all done through, if you don't have the faith of the elders of the tribe, then you lose the mandate from heaven. That's China. China has the mandate from heaven. Putin requires the Russian oligarchy's consent. In the Middle East, the tribal elders have to believe in you. And they lose faith in Fawd was his name, and so then Faisal comes in. Yom Kippur War happens in 73. That was when Israel attacks the Arabs, and in response, Faisal does the embargo. That leads to Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State, going over there and negotiating what we now call the petrodollar deal, where in exchange for selling oil in all dollar and like only in US dollars, which is what created the petrodollar, we will become protectors of Saudi Arabia. The US military will. Henry Kissinger, by the way, immediately comes home from that meeting and in early 74 resigns from Nixon's cabinet and rides off into the sunset, citing Watergate as the reason he's resigning. But really what was happening at the time, 71, one of his proteges under his orders goes and forms a little thing called the World Economic Forum. That's Klaus Schwab. His other main protege in 73 goes to Japan and Europe and forms what's called the Trilateral Commission. That was Zbigniew Brzezinski. And between the Trilateral Commission and the World Economic Forum, which Henry Kissinger then leaves the White House and joins those two things, that's what basically plots the takeover of the world throughout the 70s, is those two organizations. That's basically, the Council of 300, the globalist hegemony are those two organizations, among other ones, but those two were very, very important. And then, of course, a year later, King Faisal, is murdered by his nephew, who had just returned from an extended trip to Virginia, which is where Langley's located. So the prevailing theory is that his nephew, who was mentally ill, was an MK Ultra assassin who was sent to kill his uncle, who was viewed very much as a Saudi populist, a Saudi nationalist. He led men into battle when he was 13 on horseback. Very old school, preferred to live in a tent rather than a palace, a true Bedouin. And I think MBS is his actual spiritual successor, because that's what they say about MBS, is that he's a true Bedouin. He's not one of these spoiled rotten Saudi princes. Now, that guy who I just described, his son is this guy on screen, Turkey. So Turkey was the head of Saudi intelligence in the 90s, and then resigns actually August 31st, 2001, effective September 1st, 2001, resigns from Saudi intelligence, never comes back. My speculation has been for many years that the reason he resigned is he figured out what was about to happen and wanted nothing to do with it. He figured out what John Brennan and the others were planning, and he wanted nothing to do with it. So he resigns and walks away. October 7th happens, Israel's 9/11, right? And the Saudis are totally silent for like a month, right? They're totally silent. There is radio silence out of Saudi Arabia, nothing from them. The first person to come forward publicly and give any sort of public address about October 7th is this guy right here, Turkey Al-Faisal. And I thought when that happened, I posted about it. I talked about it. It was very significant. And the reason it was significant is because I think MBS picked him for a very strategic reason, because this guy understands the Western intelligence as well as anyone. He understands who actually killed his father. He understands who actually did 9/11. And here he is again, coming in with the signal, telling the truth, talking about how Israel is actually a greater regional threat to the Middle East than Iran. And Iran and Saudi have been enemies since 1979. That was what radicalized the Middle East, was Iran saying the Saudis are Western puppets. They are traitors to the Muslim faith. We are the true proprietors of the Muslim faith. Believe in us. We're more orthodox than they are. We practice Sharia law. And then the Saudis said, oh yeah, we're actually more orthodox than them. We're going to close down our movie theaters. Oh yeah, we're going to close down our cafes. Oh yeah, well, women can't speak in public anymore. Oh yeah, well, and then before you know, a few years later, you have the radicalization of the Middle East. No more Santa Claus riding on camelback down the main street in Riyadh. That is how the Middle East became radicalized. And MBS talks about that. It happened in the 1980s. So undoing all of that, which has been MBS's agenda ever since he became the crown prince in 2017, with the help of this guy, has been critical. So let me go to this clip from, first let me go to Laura Loomer. Here's Laura Loomer. Watch. Speaking in Qatar at the Doha Forum today, U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barrack, suggested that Israel isn't a democracy and should instead aspire to have a monarchy like Islamic countries, because monarchy is the best form of government. Quote, Israel, we'll listen to his quote. This is very inappropriate commentary from a U.S. ambassador to be making. Is he saying a monarchy is better than a democracy or constitutional republic? Israel is a democracy. Ambassador Barrack, like some other admin officials, has been infected with the Arab money virus that clouds judgment. So before you listen to what this guy says, remember, this guy is Donald Trump's best friend. This is the guy that Donald Trump trusts the most outside of his own family. And listen to what he says here.
First thing that has to happen is we have to allow them, Syria, to define it themselves, without going in with Western expectations of saying we want a democracy in 12 months. We've never had a democracy anyway. I don't see a democracy. Israel can claim that it's a democracy, but in this region, really what's worked the best, whether you like it or you don't like it, is a benevolent monarchy. That first thing.
So there you go. This guy has been accused of being like an Israel puppet by everybody, like all the usual suspects, accuse this guy of being a shill for Israel. And there he is, actually calling out that the illusion of democracy is actually what presides over Israel. And he's saying the benevolent monarchy is what works in that part of the world, because of their culture, because of their history, because of everything. That's what works. You know, America is exceptional because it has its own history, its own culture, but we can't just export that model to every other place in the world. And he's responding to a question about Syria because what's being demanded by the neocons is that Syria adopt a federalist model where you have like a strong central government and then states around Syria that all basically, you know, like the federalist system, but in Syria. And Syria is saying, we don't want that. That's not going to work for us because we have too many different ethnic divisions. We have too many different tribal divisions. The federalist model isn't going to work for us. I don't know what's going to happen in Syria, but I do wonder if we're going to see someone like Assad come back. Let's play this interaction because the other person that's been getting hammered is Tucker Carlson. Here's actually, I don't know if this is true or not, but here's like a trending thing on X saying that Tucker Carlson plans to purchase a home in Qatar. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't seen that interview, but here's a 2-minute clip of him and the prime minister from Qatar doing an interview. Oh, I'm sorry. Ship is tab. There we go.
The starting of the relationship with Hamas and the communication was started back more than 10 years, 13 years ago at the request of the United States. So even beyond that, like it was 19 years ago when they first participated in the election, and then when they moved their office back in 2012 here, it was used only for the communication and to facilitate like ceasefire, facilitating aids to Gaza. Now, unfortunately, Qatar has been attacked for having them here. But when you look, you know, at what's happening within the region, this region, when you look at its conflict, it has the parties of the conflict. Sometimes they are state actors, sometimes they are non-state actors. If you have no one speaking to those non-state actors, how we are going to resolve or to reach to a solution at the end of the day? And now we have seen that this communication has led to ceasefires, has led to the release of the hostages, has led to alleviating the suffering of the people over there. And unfortunately, you know, there are like politicians who are trying to use this to score like short-term political gains to fuel their narratives in order to, like, you know, using Qatar to blame another country for what's happening over there or for their wrong policies. All our aid and all our support and financing that went, and what they claimed that it went to Hamas, went to Gaza, went to the people, and it was under very transparent process that the United States is fully aware about. Israel is the one who's facilitating, and it's not one government, it was across governments. Netanyahu, Bennett, we have dealt with all the agencies. Lapid was a prime minister at a certain point of time, Mossad, Shin Bet, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. All of the, and the defense, all of them, they were involved in these aids and the delivery of those aids.
So that's the quote, or part of the quote that we read earlier. And what he's referring to again is the transparency that occurred. The money moving from Qatar to Israel that ultimately went to Hamas was totally transparent. But the movement between Qatar and Israel, everybody knew about it. The US knew about it. All the levels of government in Israel knew about it. The secrecy was when, once it arrived in Israel, they secretly put it in briefcases and walked it into Gaza and gave it to certain families who then gave the briefcases to Hamas to make sure it went to the right places where it would be used for militancy as opposed to aid. And that's ultimately what led to October 7th. That money was used to finance October 7th. Those are the allegations being levied against Netanyahu by people within the Israeli political spectrum. And so let's see, I want to bring this thing home.
While you're doing that, shout out to Mega Nuke, who gifted 5 subscriptions. Thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Hell yeah. So here's Tom Barrack as well. Again, Barrack warns Israel cannot defeat Hezbollah, urges negotiations. He is openly saying in this appearance, this is from the other day, that you cannot disarm Hezbollah. And he said, the quote is, "My personal opinion is you kill one terrorist, you create 10. That can't be the answer. There has to be another answer." He urged Lebanon's leaders to agree to direct negotiations with Israel. Quote, "It's time to march to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, sit down and have a discussion." He said, "It's time to end this." And that brings us to this story, which is from last week. Hezbollah and Saudi Arabia now have an uneasy alliance. And why that's significant is because you remember the Syrian civil war, which started in 2011. The people who were funding the rebels in Syria that became ISIS, that were fighting not only Assad, but Hezbollah, because the only entity that came to Assad's defense in the beginning was Hezbollah. They're the ones who came over from Lebanon, defended Assad against ISIS. And then eventually in 2015, Putin wasn't in office at that point. Medvedev was. He gets back in office in 2012. And then in 2015, he sends the Russian army to Syria to defend Assad. But before that, it was Hezbollah. So Hezbollah has been fighting ISIS. ISIS was backed by the bad twin in Saudi, the bad twin in Qatar, the bad twin in the UAE. So the Saudis and Hezbollah have been enemies for many, many years. They've been severe enemies. Now there's an alliance now that is emerging, and the common ground is Israel. And this article talks about back channels that are being used to establish this relationship. Here is a similar, where is it? We have a similar dynamic emerging between the Lebanese government and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and the Lebanese government and Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is not, like, the military part of Hezbollah is not the Lebanese government. That they're like a militia. There is a political arm of Hezbollah, but ever since this new government that came into office a year ago in Lebanon, which is ostensibly backed by the Saudis, they originally were demanding the disarmament of Hezbollah. Now they're actually saying we're not going to disarm Hezbollah because we're seeing what Israel's doing in Syria, and it makes us very worried. We think that Israel's going to come for us next, and Hezbollah might be the only thing standing between us and the IDF if they choose to do that. So we're not going to disarm them. It's also physically impossible to disarm a populace where everybody owns an automatic weapon. You just can't do it. You and I both know that. Every American should understand that. Behind every blade of grass is a rifle. The difference between America and the Middle East, Hezbollah, is that everyone in Hezbollah owns a 50 caliber machine gun, or an AK-47, or much heavier equipment than the average small arms owner in America does. Most people in America don't own a 50 caliber machine gun, but plenty of people in Hezbollah do. So you're never going to disarm Hezbollah. That's what Tom Barrack is saying. You need to negotiate with them. Israel says they have no interest in doing that. They want to fight them until they destroy them. And it's just more and more and more and more of the same. And where I'll end this today is, here's the article I was looking at. Hezbollah won't give up its weapons without a decision from Iran, the Lebanese foreign minister is saying. So again, you're seeing all this cooperation from all these Muslim countries: Iran, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, countries that all hated each other a few years ago. They're all ethnically different. They're all culturally different. We look at them in the West and we see a bunch of Muslims, but you who serve in the Middle East probably understand that all the different ethnicities that are there, how the Turks are very different from the Arabs are very different from the Persians. Even within the Arabs, there are lots of different sub-ethnicities and subgroups. Even within Syria or Lebanon, you have multiple different ethnicities and subgroups that don't agree on things. And getting them all on the same sheet of music has been the challenge of Donald Trump and MBS over the past 10 years, and they've done it. And now you have Tom Barrack, once again, noting the Trump-Erdogan bromance, says U.S. wants a role for Turkey in Gaza. He's demanding it, actually. He says, quote, "If I were personally advising Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I'd say it's one of the most brilliant things he could do. Do I think it's going to happen? No, it's trust, and I don't think that trust exists." And he's talking about, because he was positing if Turkey could succeed at non-violently disarming Hamas due to its ties with the terror group. But he says he doesn't think Israel will agree to let Turkey participate. He's, quote, "My personal opinion is you kill one terrorist, you create 10. And that's where that quote comes from. Now, the reason that I think it works with Hamas, but it's not going to work with Hezbollah, Hamas has already agreed to do this. They've already signed an agreement saying that they're going to do it. Hezbollah has not agreed to disarm. So it's two different, very different situations. Hamas understands if it disarms, it gets immunity, and it gets to live. So, and then if you have the people who are purportedly backing it, Turkey and maybe Iran, coming in to back that effort, you could actually make it work. Again, I think all of this is about narrative seeding, to understand that it's like taking a mastodon down. Like if you could imagine cavemen taking down a mastodon, like an ancient elephant. They're going to surround it. They're going to corner it. They're going to come up with a plan with their spears to kill it, because one of them alone can't kill that thing. Can't kill a woolly mammoth, but 20 of them working together can. The woolly mammoth here is the IDF, not just the IDF, but the diaspora. APAC, TPUSA, the funding mechanisms that orbit around Israel and are very, very powerful. That's what they're taking on. And if they want to take it on, they all have to work together and they all have to coordinate together. And I think Trump is helping them do that.
It is absolutely brilliant how you laid that out right now, because you made the picture more clear of kind of, I've recognized what Trump's doing, but how do you put it into words? And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think in a real, Marine Corps that eats crayons, right? Keep it simple, stupid. I see that as in, if Trump would have came in, and for those that are aware of, like the actual Zionists, like the bad part, right? And just said, hey, we're severing our relationship with Israel. I mean, strategically, that's dangerous because there's still a lot of backdoors in our infrastructure. But even if you ignored that and you just went off the surface level, what the general populace understands, that politically he doesn't survive that. He gets impeached. Everybody supports it because he can't do that. But what I'm seeing here, through these shows that we've done is, and hat tip to those that love that phrase, saving Israel for last. I think this makes sense. Rather than start off by severing that relationship, it's let's fix men and build relationships with everything that surrounds that's always been told is a threat. We got a relationship with Saudi Arabia. We got a relationship with Qatar, with Trump and Erdogan, the bromance. If you start showing the American populace that, look, we got people, some allies, some just respectful, coexisting, nation states, and we're doing these trades and they're being brought to these meetings, and if Trump shows that everyone that Israel has told us is a threat to us, and everyone that we've been raised to believe is a threat to us because of what you believe regarding 9/11 or anything else, you walk away from that and you're just like, and now you see Trump is like, oh, he's fixing these relationships. Oh, look, Saudi Arabia, purged all this corruption. And you start, Tuckers and Qatar. What? No, we were told if you go there, they're going to behead you. But he's over there. Other Americans have gone over there. You start to let everybody bring down their guard and fear from these countries. And then they start to see everything that you just outlined. You start to see a lot of that, start to flourish. Then what does that make that little country that's left look like when they're like, no, America, you got to bomb them and bomb them? You're going to get the regular populace, the Christian Zionists, the people that are just observing this through the lens of scripture to be like, well, hold on over there. Why do we want to do that? Why do we want to create tension and chaos on something we finally have avoided that? Then you're positioned with, two, potentially a third option. Israel concedes everything that they've been doing and develops a working relationship with their neighbors, or Israel, kind of like what we saw in that article, double downs and says, no, there's not going to be a Palestinian state. And now people that have been hard supporters of it are like, well, you know what? I can't. Let's be honest. These people are not going to just say, oh, I'm going to turn my back on Israel because of this. They're not going to do that. If anybody has that expectation, we're not there yet. But here's something they would demand. Israel needs to change their government to somebody that wants more peace. And then you see that, what's
that going to and the question is, what is that going to provoke within Israel among the contingent that cannot allow that to happen?
And that's where we see, and you gotta have every surrounding part of that formula in perfect alignment before you can get to that point.
Yeah. Well, think about, you made a perfect point there. Like, think about what the old adage about the Middle East is. People say that you can't fix the Middle East. It's unfixable because there's too much tribalism. There's too much history there. There's too much conflict. There's too much distrust. Trump has disproven all of that. We've seen all of that now go away. And the reason that it's been like that for so long is because I think Israel and MI6 and French intelligence, who have been in the Middle East for the past century, as well as the CIA, what they've been doing is they've been going in and pitting these tribes against one another, pitting these groups against one another. So they all fight one another as opposed to teaming up and fighting Israel, right? Which is what their natural self-interest would dictate. Instead, they go and they infiltrate groups, they turn them against one another, whatever. We've seen that happen in other places as well. Now because of this common threat, which I think has been exacerbated by President Trump's rhetoric over the past couple of years, he has enabled the worst inhibitions in Israel. He basically has emboldened their hubris, and I'm talking about like the Netanyahus of Israel. He's emboldened their hubris. He's enabled their worst inhibitions, and now they proudly, with moments like from February 4th, where he said the Gaza Riviera, we're going to take over Gaza, we're going to kick all the Gazans out, we're going to build a nice casino there, right? And how triggered, and then he backed up, he was like, maybe we're not going to do that. But after that, like Ted Cruz and all them were like, hell yeah, we're going to do that. Like, hell yeah, we're going to kick all these dumb Gazans out, and we're going to take over this place and build a casino. And now they're just showing you who they really are and what their plan was the whole time, because they think they have the backing of Trump. He's emboldened them in a way that they've never felt emboldened before. And what that's done is all of the people surrounding Israel who used to hate one another have all looked at each other and said, well, wait a minute. Like, yeah, you and I haven't gotten along, but those differences actually seem pretty small compared to this threat that we all now face. Maybe we should sideline this thing, because Trump has his allies like MBS and Erdogan and Faisal bin Farhan running around the Middle East and establishing these bilateral agreements and deals. And, it's taken us several years for them to learn to trust one another, but they finally do. And now they all can work together to bring this thing to a head. And who knows how it resolves, but Russia's going to be involved too. They're in Syria already, in southern Syria. So they're going to be there. They're going to be involved. But then conversely, saving Israel for last. Why is Israel saved for last? Well, it's not just about taking down the Jewish ethno-state, the Jewish supremacy state in government in the Middle East. It's also about taking down the other apparatus, the other part of that in America, the thing that controls our government. What you're seeing right now, the thing that controls most importantly the Republican Party. And you're seeing that conflict unfold. You mentioned Candace Owens. I'm not really familiar. I've been tracking like all of Candace's claims. I know she's claiming a lot of crazy stuff. Some of it makes sense. Some of it probably doesn't. But I think the conflict is good, because what the conflict is forcing is it's forcing people to talk about things they didn't want to talk about before. And it's forcing all these shills to come out and attack people for just asking earnest questions. And whether or not, whatever is animating Candace, and I don't know if it's something good or something bad, arguments can certainly be made all ways. The net effect of it all is that it is ripping the Republican Party apart. Tim Pool posted that the other day. Tim Pool said, this is ripping the Republican Party apart. And I say to that, good. This is exactly what we want. We want the friction. We want the conflict, because the Republican Party is the thing standing between the American people and salvation. That's the thing that's holding us back in the room and saying, nope, you can't go to the golden age yet, because we need a war with Venezuela. We need a war with Russia. We need a war with the Middle East. We need a war between Taiwan and China. We need all these wars in order to accomplish our goals. You can't have the golden age. And so until we defeat that boss, the Republican Party, and take it down, which really is a mask. That's like a transnational diaspora that controls our government through proxies. Until we take that thing down, we're never going to have self-governance. We're never going to have sovereignty. We're never going to have all the things that we set off 10 years ago to achieve. We're never going to achieve that mission until we take this thing on. And that thing can best be represented by the Republican Party.
I'm there with you. I call it the filtration process to get rid of the infiltration that is, decades been around. A lot of times when we talk about, the infiltration to our movement, we think about the recent infiltration, the recent voices. You got to understand the infiltration into the conservative movement long before MAGA was even a concept. That goes back decades.
Yeah. Iran Contra. For those who don't remember, after the Ayatollah comes in 1979, we, the United States, were selling weapons to the Ayatollah because we wanted him to fight Saddam Hussein, right? You know who brokered the deal between us and Iran? Israel. They were the ones who were actually going into Tehran and selling the weapons to the Ayatollah. They took the cash from those deals and they gave it to the Contras in Nicaragua to overthrow the governments down there, so that the cocaine trade would continue to flow for the CIA in Central America. This is all tied to what's going on in Colombia and Venezuela right now, by the way. Israel is heavily involved in all that. And, you know, that is exactly how all that plays out. I mean, Iran-Contra was being funded once Congress got involved in the 80s, figured out what was going on, cut off the funding for Iran-Contra to sell those weapons deals. You know where they got funding from? They got funding from the televangelists. This was all disclosed through CIA declassified documents. They went to Pat Robertson, the 700 Club, all of them, all the old ladies who were given $20 to Pat Robertson in the 80s and the 700 Club and others like him. That money was actually being funneled down to Central America to arm and overthrow governments in Central and South America, funded by televangelists, by the CIA. So yeah, this has been, and that is at the root of the Republican Party, like the evangelical Zionist movement. And so all of it's nefarious, it's all rotten, and it all has to be, I think, exposed and adjudicated.
I agree with you with that completely. So with that, we'll go to our one and only ad for today's show. And then when we come back, I will let you guys know where to follow Ghost at. So let's pay a bill real quick. I'll cover my face so you guys can keep looking at Ghost's perfect hair. Be clear, cryptocurrency is no longer emerging. It's here, and the latest move cements that reality in the biggest way yet. Trump Media Group just inked a massive $6.4 billion deal with Crypto.com, the world's top crypto platform. They're teaming up to scoop up $6.4 billion in CRO. That's the powerhouse token that fuels fast, low-fee DeFi, staking rewards, and real-world perks like cash back on your spends to launch America's first CRO treasury. When it's done, this new company will be the biggest CRO holder out there. Want in on the action? Head to Crypto.com today and grab some CRO. Let's make crypto great again. With that, Ghost, Rumble was able to fix their thing, and so everybody in the live chat's been having a great time. You do phenomenal work. I appreciate it beyond, the time that we have for that kind of explanation. I think where can people find the work that you do? We do have a lot of new people watching because we're on YouTube now, and
hell yeah.
And this show's been doing really well on YouTube. So to the YouTube audience, thank you for watching. Do us a solid, share, put this out there and help it continue to grow in the YouTube algorithm. But where can people find you if they want more of your work?
The best place to find me is Geopolitics with Ghosts on Badlands Media. We have a Rumble channel. We have a YouTube channel. Alpha can link you to all those. I also write every single day for 5 days a week for the Badlands newsletter, which is on the Badlands Media Substack. I have a few other shows that I do as well. Badlands Daily Tuesday morning, Breaking History Wednesday at noon, and the Book of Trump Monday night. Tomorrow night, I'm doing the Russian Chechnya wars of the early Putin years and explaining, because you're talking about like a Muslim conflict. That's the Muslims fighting the Russians back when Putin was first came into power, and there were two wars, and one of them he was against the Muslims, and the second time the Chechens were with Putin, and the Chechens now have formed the core of the Wagner Group, which is now the group that is in Africa, the group in Ukraine, the group that went into Syria, the group that's been liberating a lot of these places from the CIA and MI6 and Mossad. So there, all the content I do ties together. I look at history from 25 years ago, and more often than not, you will just see the exact same story playing out 25 years ago that's playing out right now. It's crazy. So Geopolitics with Ghost, though, Tuesday and Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern.
There you have it. And we did have 2 Rumble rents that came in, so I'll get to those real quick. First one, $5 from I'm a Man Nuke Mag, and I believe that's the old name of Mega Nuke, says about time to change the 20 minutes flag. RF LMAO.
Yeah, it's definitely true.
We'll figure out how we can adjust that title. $10 coming in from Heather J. Jones 1. Love to Ghost and Jerome so much, Alpha, with the laughing emoji. You guys do us a solid on your way out. Hit the thumb, hit the heart, leave a comment. Just don't like that hits the algorithm. And here's a cool thing I want to let you guys know. For some of you that have your own Rumble channels out there, Rumble is promoting us rating other channels that we have out there. And since Badlands doesn't have a live show right now for me to raid, I'm going to fire us off into RT for some of you to get a different perspective than what you're probably used to. I think Ghosts and myself, I routinely check what RT got going out there. So we're going to raid you on over to RT's channel. But what I do want is if you guys have your channels and you run a live show or something like that, let me know. And I can let you know when to do a show that follows mine so I can rate it, because they want us to get a bunch of unique raids out there to help each other grow, which I think is cool. So with that, you guys, we'll see you over there on RT. God bless. Number 5, football Sunday. Niners got a pass. So I just want to see the teams I don't like lose. Catch you guys next time. God bless and good afternoon and good night.